Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Veeam webinar on Exchange, SQL, and Active Directory. We might even have some SharePoint in store for you, and how to easily recover your data for these mission-critical applications. My name is Billy Cashwell. I'm a Senior Manager of Product Marketing here at Veeam, and I'm also joined by Travis Miller, who is a Product Marketing Analyst, also working here at Veeam. I'm going to go through a few slides. We'll take about 15 minutes or so to go through those, just a little kickoff, and then we will open up the floor to Travis to actually demonstrate a lot of this, and we know that's what you guys really want to see. Just to cut something off before we get a lot of questions on it, we do have questions. We have a question area in the Go to My Webinar. So if you would like to ask questions along the way, that's the best way to do it. Either myself or Travis will respond to you. Also, there's usually a lot of the same question around, will you get a copy of this or get the recording? And the answer is absolutely yes. It takes a couple of days, but once we're done, you'll be notified and you will be able to get the recording of this webinar with the deck or with the that goes through the presentation and goes through the demo. So let's get started. Everything is about data. You know, in the past, we talked about protecting servers or protecting applications or this or that, but it really comes down to protecting the data. It just so happens that most of the mission critical data that you and your company generate are generated from applications. And when we think about the challenges that face data today and it extrapolates out to the applications, you're having to deal with just massive growth from being driven by multiple applications, being driven by maybe a serious amount of logging that you have, from dealing with compliance, right? Things that you have to keep for just about forever based on what industry or vertical you're in. All of these items cobbled together build complexity, because now it's gone from just storing your data and backing up your data to you actually have to manage the data now. You have to do more with it, and you have to take advantage of the data that you've got. And then finally, security is paramount. And we're not just talking about physical security anymore. It's acts of nature, it's malware, ransomware, malicious actors, all sorts of breaches that we've seen recently that not only are costly to the company in business, but they're costly in revenue, and they're very, very impactful to a brand. And branding is something that you never want to tarnish if you can avoid it. If I could get these, there we go. So we also did some research this year internally. So we did the Veeam Cloud Data Management Report that we published in July of 2019. And inside of that, we saw some things that I kind of expected to see. It's numbers, I've been in the industry almost 30 years. These are numbers I'd like to see go down, but I think it's pretty apropos for what you guys see also. And that was that around 80% of businesses required some form of disaster recovery in the past 2 years. And when we talk about disaster recovery, especially as it applies to an application, it's easy to, you can see here clearly that downtime of a single application can cost more than $100,000 an hour. And honestly, in the report, we saw many approaching the $300,000 and $400,000 mark. So you really have to think about not how much does your application cost, but what does your application data cost, and how are you dealing with it against growth, complexity, compliance, and security? So why Veeam? We see it as three pretty easy things. Veeam is simple, Veeam is reliable, and Veeam is flexible. Let's talk about that a little bit. When we talk about the simplicity that's Veeam, it's quite intuitive with granular recovery, scalable architecture, and the thing that we love, and this is not our tagline, this is something that we've stolen from our customers because we hear it just works. Veeam has earned a solid reputation for simple, easy to use products that deliver instant value. And again, don't take it from me, look at some of the peer feedback that we get in reviews. It just works. It really just works. Easy to use, quick and fantastic support. Those are the things we pride ourselves on. When we talk about it's reliable, Veeam has a portable data format, which is super important these days as you're moving data between sites, or maybe you're moving to the cloud for the first time. Maybe you're migrating between clouds altogether. It's that portable data format that is native to Veeam that's really going to facilitate that for you. Verified recovery is also extremely important because this is more than just a basic CRC check. This is actually going in, mounting information, mounting a replica, making sure that that recovery can happen when you need it so that you can meet your objectives. Absolute strong support. You saw that in some of the peer feedback on the previous slide. We pride ourselves on the fact that around 95% of cases that come into Veeam support are closed by our tier 1 team. So the first level team they come into, 95% of them are closed. What that means to you is when you need help, when you need that assistance, it's quick to get and you can get out of the call and your time to resolution is short. And then beyond just support, we offer built-in analytics to help you identify issues before they truly become problems, to do things like chargeback, to make sure that everyone that's using your IT data center is chipping in to help pay for the cost. And then finally, when it comes to flexibility, Veeam is absolutely software defined. We've championed this for years, completely hardware agnostic. And when we talked about data management, that is the sweet spot that we put ourselves in. What else can you do? Not only do you have to manage the data, the sprawling file data, the data between on-premises and in the cloud, but again, what else can you do with that? Now that you've got a backup done, can you do something else with it? Like put it and stand it up in a sandbox so that you can do tests, dev, apply a patch to it, roll something back, do some security testing, maybe even data mining, maybe even data masking. There's all sorts things you can do with those backups that you've already got. And of course, we're cloud ready. So the thing about Veeam is we don't double charge you when using the cloud, so no cloud fees. Absolute mobility when it comes to moving between clouds or moving to a cloud, and we protect applications that are absolutely cloud native. The thing that I really like about the simplicity that Veeam brings to the table is that we offer a single platform for cloud, virtual, and physical. This platform is delivered through areas of monitoring and analytics, orchestration, backup and replication or intelligent recovery, and universal storage APIs. Our platform shows and enjoys a wide breadth and depth of support across the many different virtual, physical, and cloud-based workloads and platforms that we see in the world today, as well as a very strong vendor and partner support through our alliances that are working with most of the partners that you guys, the same ones, and that's just where, those are times where we can be better together. When we talk about the stack, we deliver this across 5 different key use case areas. Monitoring and analytics, helping you to increase efficiency and reduce your costs by knowing more about what's going on. Disaster recovery orchestration, meeting those service level objectives, meeting those service level agreements that you've set, hitting that recovery time, recovery point objectives with confidence. Backup and intelligent recovery. Again, that verified data protection I talked to you about. If you didn't back it up right, if you can't verify that, you're not really ready at time of disaster. Data loss avoidance, making sure that you just don't miss anything. And instant recovery. This is something that has long been a big point that we like to stand on, a point that we pride ourselves on at Veeam, and that's our ability to instantly recover just about anything out there. Copy data management, I talked about that just a moment ago. Again, how do you leverage your data for greater business acceleration? And then finally, cloud mobility. We've talked about that data portability, again, from on-prem to the cloud or even between clouds. And to productize this stack, if you will, or this platform, for monitoring and analytics, we have Veeam One. For orchestration, we have Veeam Availability Orchestrator. For backup and replication, backup and recovery, we have Veeam Backup and Replication, which is the flagship product, as well as Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365. Travis will talk about that little in the demo. Just remember that when you're watching Travis use the Veeam Explorers in Veeam Backup and Replication, the same thing can be applied to Office 365. It's the same experience, same simplicity. And if you combine the insight and remedial capabilities of Veeam One along with Veeam Backup and Replication, that is our truly flagship suite called Veeam Availability Suite. So just switching gears back to applications for a moment, when you consider backup and intelligent recovery for applications, there's some core challenges that I'm sure you're facing all the time when it comes to this. You're looking for a backup solution that's easy to use. You don't have all day to babysit this. You don't scale very well, usually as a backup admin of one. You want to scale out to other administrators, but if they have to be a backupologist, if you will, to be able to do these things, that's really counterproductive for you. You've got to be able to protect those critical applications, your email, your databases, your CRM. You've got to meet your recovery objectives. And this could be for many reasons. Maybe it's a service level agreement you've got with a department inside your company, or just meeting your recovery objectives to get the data center or an application back online. That's critical and key to everything. And then finally, by meeting those recovery objectives, you can finally achieve, and what you need to achieve is that reliable disaster recovery specifically for applications. Because remember about the cost of downtime just for a single application. So the solution you're looking for should be simple. It should be able to install and start protecting data in minutes. It should provide an online application aware protection, meaning that you can protect an application while it's in an online state. You don't have to take it down to protect it. It should be fast, offering full application and both granular recovery to make sure you get that flexibility you need in the fastest way possible. And to mention flexibility, you've got to have the flexible restore options, including point in time for things like those large databases, so that you can recover anything, anywhere, at any time. So let's talk about Veeam backup and replication, the box I had highlighted. So Veeam Backup and Replication, or VBR, supports workloads including cloud workloads, where we can protect to the cloud, in the cloud, and from the cloud. Virtual workloads across the board, vSphere, Hyper-V, Nutanix, Acropolis, so you've got AHV there. Physical, Microsoft, Windows, Linux, just what you expect. And when it comes to applications, it really runs the gamut of the most popular applications that we're seeing used in the market, from Office 365, again, supported through Veeam Backup for Office 365, Active Directory, SharePoint, SQL, Exchange, and even Oracle and SAP HANA databases. And the three things, if I had to distill it down to just a few items that this really helps you do: first and foremost, protect those workloads and applications in the time you need. Meet that window, meet your recovery objectives, and be able to implement a comprehensive DR strategy so you're not hit with that $100,000 plus per hour bill, or loss, if you will, I should say, based on downtime of an application. I mentioned application aware and VM backup. So our goal here is to ensure complete, consistent backups for all of those mission critical applications that you've got. For any of the applications that support the volume shadow copy service from Microsoft, we perform our application aware image processing leveraging VSS. That way we get that image level backup for any VM that are running those VSS aware applications. Some examples of that would be Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, and AD. So again, we're utilizing those snapshots so that you don't have to take the application online. We create our own filter level driver so that we can capture changes to objects, files, and transactions, so that when it's time to perform the backup, we can just get the things that have changed. And again, beyond VSS, because VSS will do things like quiescing an application. In the case of something like Exchange, it will even truncate logs once it receives backup complete. But in the case of something like SQL, for example, where you have to run that log truncation job, you can run specific application operations post backup, or choose that as an option as you're going through it. We did get some questions on previous calls around applications that are not VSS supported, and they weren't really asking about Oracle or something like RMN or Backend and SAP. Just looking for something that doesn't really support any of that. Again, you can run, or we can help you create pre and post what we call thaw, so like freeze and thaw scripts, in order to quiesce those applications so that you can capture the changes and you can still protect them in an online state. So what we're going to be showing today, this is something that comes part of Veeam Backup and Replication. You can also use these Explorers independently. And what the Veeam Explorers do is they help you to quickly and easily restore those granular items. So those application level items, including emails, attachments, files, contacts, objects in Active Directory, OUs, databases, so on and so forth, config DBs for SharePoint. You can do it all, and you can put them back to their original location. Veeam offers Explorers for the following: Microsoft Exchange, Active Directory, SharePoint, and SQL Server, as well as Oracle and storage snapshots. In the demo today, we're just going to be focusing on the VSS-based products, so the Microsoft products, and that's what Travis will be taking you through. And finally, before we get into the demonstration portion, we put our heads together and really thought about, recovery is paramount. Recovery is everything. That's what, we don't have backup objectives. We usually have recovery objectives, right? As such, we looked at what are all the different recovery and restore scenarios that you can do with VBR from Veeam. There's 57 of them, which is just, it's amazing. I talk about that flexibility. Here it is, you can see it, proof positive of that flexibility. But today we're just focusing on the Explorers, mainly in the lower right. I did want to highlight in the upper left, again, we do have an Explorer for storage snapshots, so you can leverage storage snapshots for those granular type recoveries. In addition to the Explorers that we're talking about today, where you could do things including exporting a container or an object in AD, restoring a folder, an item in Exchange, restoring the DB schema in SQL, or even a config database in SharePoint. So again, VBNR can protect all those things in an application-aware online state. You get a single pass backup of that. You can verify that it can be recovered, and you can leverage the simplicity of the Veeam Explorers to go through and do recoveries of all different levels. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Travis Miller to take us through the demonstration of the Explorers. Again, we've got a question area, so feel free to ask questions along the way. Travis?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this. Let me get my screen share here, 1 second. And everybody should see everything here. Right now, I have the Veeam Backup and Replication console open, and just on our standard backup jobs view. This is where you'll usually live in most times within our product. And back to what Billy was saying earlier, you notice how we have Nutanix backup jobs, Hyper-V backup jobs, Windows agents, Linux agents, and VMware backups, all in the same console, managed by the same server and everything right here. So it can handle all your different workloads. Today we are discussing the Explorers, so we're going to jump right into that. I'm going to start off with the Veeam Explorer for Exchange. So there's a couple options when you go to doing restores. Today I'm going to start off and show you with the one going through along our top ribbon. So what we're going to do is go up to Restore, and this is a VMware backup that I'm aware of. You can choose your different type depending on the backup job that's covering the solution. Select VM, then I am doing it from a backup. You can also launch your Explorers from replicas as well, so you're not limited to just doing it from backups. Then I'm going to select, instead of entire VM restore or so, I'm going to select the application items, and then the type of application that I want to do the restore from. I'm going to select Microsoft Exchange. Now it populates automatically from my jobs that have application-aware processing enabled, and that I recognize is an Exchange and has an Exchange database. So I'm going to select that virtual machine and then go ahead and hit next. And now it's giving me the list of restore points and how long ago and what type they are that I want to do the restore from. I'm going to pick the most recent one here. Go ahead and do next. Now it gives me the option to put something in there. So sometimes this can be helpful if you want to do it for reference of case. So come back to it within our logging and everything. We'll track this. You can just put test, or you can leave it blank if you like. So next it's right here, just telling us the restore point that we're going to mount and the Exchange server it's doing from the VM name. I'm going to go ahead and hit finish, and then this should launch the Explorer. Okay, it's launching the Explorer here. And so when this does launch the Explorer, something to keep in mind, the first time there is some prerequisites sometimes that you do have to configure depending on your environment and configuration. This automatically found the database file, and if it's in default location, it should automatically locate that file for you and populate this. If it didn't for some reason, you can add it manually, or you can do the prerequisites and general options here. And see, now this is for 2016, says configured. But if it wasn't configured and I wanted to configure another one or change this, go to this, it prompts me automatically to the where we mount the database to, and where we want to drill down is find that actual EBD file from that location, and then we can place it in here, and then it will then in the future be able to automatically mount your database. But like I said, again, it should find it. It's intelligent enough if it's in the default location. So now we have the database. I can go in and expand it. And then this will populate all our current users. Now, you do have a search function here, and I could search for my name, but depending on with our resources, usually you're gonna have a beefier server. You can search for it and it'll populate and it can go through. For time's sake, I'm just gonna scroll right down and I can come here. And what we're going to do is I can select a calendar, a contact, and you can expand these. Right now, I don't really have anything populated them, but you do have that option for restoring any of these things, or I could do the whole entire email contact. So what we're going to go to is inbox. And see, now it's populating all my existing emails. And so with this, I can search fairly easily. Let's do Hyper-V. So what that's going to do when I search, it just then shorten that list much more, because when somebody, from Jan from accounting comes to you and says, I need an email back, I can give you a rough estimate of the naming or anything else in it, then you can kind of consolidate that instead of scrolling through thousands of emails. So in this case, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to select one, and then if I right click, and I can do multiple, so you're not stuck just doing a single item at a time either. So the standard operation is restore to. This goes directly back to my production mailbox. I can do restore to, which then kind of gives me an option, which I'm going to actually go through today here. Then we have export to a PST file. Something to keep in mind with the PST file, there is some limitations. It does require Outlook to be installed on the machine that you're running the Explorer from. So if you use a remote console in Veeam or anything else, you can leverage that, or you could install Outlook on your actual Veeam server, depending on how you want to, but that is a requirement for this process. You can save it as a message file very easily. I can select this. I'm just going to select my desktop, and boom, saved as a nice little message file. Now, again, for these, you can view the emails and everything else, but does have some limitations with the .msg style. Next, we have a send to. I can send it back to myself as through an email, or just send to any other person that I would like to as well. The one thing to keep in mind with this does require setting up your own SMTP settings within the program under that same general options. Pretty straightforward. Most of you guys should have no problem doing, but it does require that to do it. So I'm going to go back up to the restore to. So this comes up, then since I'm doing this one, I want to choose a different location because I already have the email in there, and it will just skip it if it notices the same email without comparing. So what I'm going to do is just select this. It's the mailbox I'm going back to, the account that I am using. One caveat when you are doing restores to this, the account that you are going to use does require to have a mailbox on the Exchange server. So if you're using a service account, sometimes you need to create one, or if you just use an existing domain admin, we'll usually handle that. So I'm going to go ahead and do next. Selecting the Exchange server I'm restoring to through the CAS server. And instead of original, I'm just going to do this and select the folder and hit next here, and it should validate and then go. So now I have this, I can do changed items. So if we have multiple, I could do missing items, changed items, and everything, and you can adjust that to your granular ability, because if there was a group of emails, you can just select them all and say, okay, just do the ones that have changed that's from production, or just missing items. So I'm going to go ahead and do restore now. And there we go. And it is restored back. Nice and quick, easy here. So with that one, you can use a compare with production to see what emails are different, because sometimes that can be helpful for determining what I need to restore, because if they couldn't really even give you any data to complete the restore process. I'll show you something very similar in AD here in just a second to use that same feature. But pretty much that's it here for, you can do, like I said, the entire mailboxes, you can do the whole database. You have several options of how far you want to drill down to, or, you know, do you want to do it in large groups? The nice thing is, after you're completed the restore and anything that you do, is all you need to is close out of this. You can go up to the top here and go to exit, or just the button here, and this will then clean up the unmounting of the database locally from the restore point. Nothing else further needed from that point. So next, what we're going to do, we're going to move on to the Active Directory. And now I'm going to show you the other method that you can launch the restore. Notice before we went to the top ribbon and I selected the restore type, then the machine. This way, I'm going under our backups disk, which covers where our existing backups are linked to backup jobs. In this case, I know the job name and what's are in there. So then I select the job, expand. So then I'm finding the domain controller. I'm going to right click on the domain controller. And then now I have the full choice of restore options. And then I'm going to select application items, Active Directory. And then now it prompts me to the restore point. So it's the exact same process that you're going through. It's just order that you're choosing things and how simplistic or how you want to locate the files that you need to restore. Nice that you have different options instead of stuck with one way always. I'm going to go ahead and do next here for the most recent. Same thing here. I'm just going to do test and then finish. And now we are going to populate. So again, this is mounting our database file, and by default, it should automatically locate it. Now you can always use a manual to add in other ones existing. And it should just take just a second here. Yep. Excuse me. Okay, so now we're at the section here. I'm going to expand and go to users and computers. Nice thing is, and you notice right down below, it has group policies as well. So you can use a lot of the exact same features for group policies other than users or other containers as well. For the demonstration today, we're going to be limited just to users to keep it. Again, they're very similar in how they work. So the one nice thing here is what I can do is when I do this compared to production, I have a user in here that's switched. And so that just compared everything to production. You notice there's one right here. It says item state changed. Now, what if I go to show only changed objects? That just narrowed it straight down. So I'm knowing everything else in there is still the same as production because it does it on the fly, reaches out to the domain controller and verifies. So right here, I found the user. Now I can go to compare attributes. Now right here, so this is what the saying, so this is showing a member of. So somebody went in the backup value prior to this was part of the administrators group. Somebody went in, deleted that potentially, or changed some other variables. So country code I added in, some different physical office locations, several different things about this that you can do. And then I could choose to restore this and overwrite from backup entire to production, or I actually have the granular ability to choose what attributes I want to restore and leave in place. So what I'm going to do here is close, and I come back to the user, right click, and then I have my restore options. Now, same thing, just like this, I'm a fan of the right click. When you select different things, you have your different restore options as well. So, and restore objects on the top ribbon. So what I'm going to do here, and same thing with this, I can do the compare attributes without doing it compare as there directly for the individual item. So you have options with this one. So what I'm going to do is restore objects to. I'm selecting my domain controller, the user account that I am using, original location container. Then this one is, I get to choose do I want to use the current password? Do I want to have them set a new password I can do now? Do not restore the password whatsoever, or require the change on first login. For this one, I'm just going to do restore password as is. Do I want to enable account or keep the state? This one I'll just do enable. And here we go. So now changed objects, deleted objects, replace or merge, or I can do entire objects or select attributes only. So if I go ahead and do next, and now if I come down through here, I can select all, I can choose different ones that I need. So and I'll just do select all here, and then I'm going to go ahead and do restore, and there we go. Fully update. Now if I bring up Active Directory, and when we did the comparison before, let me just refresh here. Now it's updated there, count, and member of. Now it's back to being a part of the administrator group. So very simple, easy to be able to do this. Same thing with group policies. You can do that compare option to really find what somebody went in and changed if you didn't know it. So it's not always just for the restore. Sometimes it can just be helpful of what is actually changed. So many times you hear is, oh, nothing was changed, and then somebody comes into the room 5 minutes later, so, oh no, I changed something, for so-and-so yesterday. So this can definitely help you validate that very easily instead of drilling down to each individual one. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. And we got the restore closed here. So again, to close and clean up, all I do is close out, unmounts, and goes on here. So next, we're going to move on to SharePoint. So I already have SharePoint loaded, same exact process for loading it. This one just takes to populate a little bit longer. So for time's sake, I decided just to have this one preloaded. So this one, same thing. We can restore, export, library, save it directly, send it as well. Same thing with the send across all of them. SNTP is required for configurations for documents. So if I want to do this, what I'm going to do is on this one, I'm going to restore the entire library. I just went through, deleted a couple random items earlier and everything from this. So I do restore library. I select the SharePoint site that I'm going to restore from, account again. Original location. So now this is going to be changed in missing items. So this will go through and compare it during the actual restore process. But permissions are going to come up and prompt me that I'm not going to be able to restore them, but should be okay because of the credentials I'm currently under. So now this will take a second to populate and go through, but then recognize out of the 105 items, how many that we do need to actually restore. Take a minute or so here. So doing a single item can definitely be a little bit faster with this. The more items you have, the longer this comparison can take to verify. So depending on the situation you're in, choosing the right selection and opportunity to complete that. But we do give you those options so you can in different situations and not just going, okay, well, I have to restore 10 items, go through manually and pick out every single item, because sometimes you don't always get those. See, so it restored 8 items, 97 were skipped, and it'll give me a list of the actual restored items right here. And all the different ones. So then I even have SharePoint up here. Let me just do a reload here. And now you can see all the different 8 items have this green mark that has now been recovered. So nice, simple, straightforward to go back to there. And you can, like I said, do the whole library. You have several different options with this. I'm going to go ahead and close out of here. And again, very straightforward, very easy to use. With this one, I'm going to then close out of this as well. And we're going to move on to the SQL Explorer. And you can, and you notice how I had the SharePoint Explorer opened during all the other ones. I had this preloaded for this. So you can do multiple restores at the same time. It's a nice benefit. You aren't just stuck doing one and everything. And all you notice is these are all part of the similar job. So they're actually using some of the same restore points. Okay, so now we're going to go to SQL. And you'll notice in this SQL, I'm under the backups disk still. I'm showing this one because we have the SQL transaction log backup enabled. And then we have the standard just image level backup. We store the backup files along with the actual backup, image level backup, so it gives you the log replayability to a single point in time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this again, select restore application. Again, notices it automatically as SQL Server database restore. So it's going to come up. I'm going to select the most recent restore point. And this one I'm just going to leave blank and then go to finish. All right, it has populated the databases. So now we have our different databases. I can choose right here. It gives me a database info, full or simple. Now the one caveat here with the log backups, it does require a full recovery model and not simple. We do have a couple that are in simple mode, so I wouldn't be able to do a point in time restore for them. With this one, actually, I'm going to close out of this. I did an earlier backup, and I haven't done the transaction log backups, so I'm actually going to revert right back and mount an order restore point so I can show you the point in time slider in place. Click here. There we go. So the same way I could have got to the same screen with the point in time, it just wouldn't allowed me to use the actual slider bar because it would have recognized, hey, I have no SQL transaction logs attached to that image level backup. Nice thing is that can save you a lot of space in your repository because you do a single day image level backup, and that still can even only be an incremental. It doesn't have to be a full entire backup every day because the way our incremental backups work, they rely on the previous restore points. So with that being said, you can then have a 15-minute SQL transaction log backup that stores a much smaller file right next to it and then give you the granular ability to restore at any point in time. So I'm going to use this database here. And in this case, I'm not going to do a full restore just because it takes too long, and it also can take a lot of space. So we have this new feature called Publish. So Publish is similar to the instant VM recovery process that Billy was talking about earlier during the slides. It's slightly different behind the scenes. It's more similar to our file level restore in how we mount to the mount server. Then we mount the database directly to the SQL server itself. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and select Publish. And again, I can publish this to a single point in time. Slider, simple as easy as this. It's giving me the window of this restore point and the logs I have available. And if it doesn't quite match up, I could jump to another restore point, mount it, and then decide what the slider is. Perform down the transaction is very handy. Again, today something I'm not going to cover directly on this webinar, but we do have some other demos that will go into this, but do know you have that capability, because if you recognize that you came down to a single transaction where you had corruption occur, you can go to the one right before that and get right to that point in time and then recover. So this does take a little bit to populate and does leverage our fine tuning, so it leverages our staging server. So now you can use the production server as a staging server, or you could have another server as well where we will mount the database to be able to basically provide you with the different transactions down to that in attributes. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and do next. And notice how I did select this. I'll move it to 215. Now this is choosing the database name and going back to the prod server in this case. I'm going to go ahead and change it because I do have a production database on that server, so I'm going to label it as restore, just so I don't run into any issues there. Using the account here. Again, this is depending on how your SQL is configured. You might have to use SQL authentication down here. You do need the required rights on SQL to complete these restores. In this instance, mine does, so I should be just perfectly fine. I'm going to go ahead and select Publish. So now this will take a second to publish. Once it comes up, I actually have our SQL Server up in SQL Management Studio. I can show you just how quickly of the size of the database. And this shouldn't really affect too much on the size of your database on how fast it's going to mount. This should be pretty much the same. It's more about your backup chain potentially, but even again, that shouldn't be a major impact other than an extra minute or so, depending on how far the incremental is away from the VBK. But if you're within 30 days on an incremental, which in most cases with a SQL server, you're going to be just fine. With this doesn't add any extra real space utilization either, because we are mounting this to the Veeam server or your mount server as a the restore point directly as a symlink. So then we're mounting to the database there, and then as we're accessing the database, we are reading from the restore point. Like I said, just like the instant VM recovery that we discussed a little bit earlier. So then we have this coming up here. Okay, a second longer. There we go. So I got about the 95%. It said upload it, and then did the logs. It jumped there, and so now the database has been restored. And then you notice up here on the top left, now we have a new section. It shows published databases. You can do multiple. You can do the same one multiple times as well. So you're not limited there. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you do multiple of the exact same database, you're reading from that same restore point, it is going to slow down its performance. So the storage that you're utilizing for the repository can affect how fast you can access this and if you have other jobs going. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and slide over the SQL Server, and let's do a refresh. I might have to close out, but nope, here we go. See, content-restore, and it's not just a shell. I can go into tables. Now again, see sometimes with the storage, how fast that expansion works, and other tables you can go into, but fully functioning and right next to your other production one. So this can be good for dev testing, one-off, everything else. The nice thing is this is not stored or will not affect your backup. Any changes you make here will not be saved to the backup file. Now, if you do make some changes, which what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over back to the backup and replication. You have the ability to export the backup in the form of a .bak file. So with that, it gives you the ability to come in, okay, I want to play around with it. Well, maybe I don't want to lose any of those changes because then I want to do a restore. You can move that and be very portable with it. So with this being said, I have this here, and I can work in the database just like that. Now for cleanup, all I have to do is go to unpublish. And so the refresh status too is if you do notice a disconnection between your repository or anything else, you might get a little icon over that. Doesn't usually happen, but all you have to do is just come and refresh status, it reestablish that connection, and then we'll show it here. So, but in this instance, what I'm going to do, I'll even do an export backup. I can choose the backup file here. Just do that. You can compress it to lower some thing. I'm just going to do the desktop as well. Export. And there we go. And now I have a backup file of my database ready to be imported or mounted to another instance if I need be. So then I'm going to go in here, unpublish, yes, and that will clean it all up. Let me bring this back over. The one thing is it will keep the database mounted to your system, the mount server, for about 10 minutes after the fact. Well, it's just verifying that it is not lost connectivity, back to that kind of refresh status, just in case. Now, this should be then cleared out here in just a second, though. And this one for the restore afterwards, let me close that. We're just going to relaunch. And it is gone. Cleaned up after itself, nice and good. Now you can leave those restore points open for as long as you like, but again, you are taxing your repository in this process, so something to keep in mind. Now you can do one-off backups or move your backups to another location if you want to stage it for just a publishing process. Now, there is a couple caveats to how and how long you can have it. Now, let's say it's about your backup job design. When you back it up, and let's say you do a weekly synthetic full process every Saturday. If I mounted it and published that on Thursday, on Saturday, when it does come around, it is going to want to lock that backup file from Thursday to be able to do the transform merge operation for the synthetic. That would prompt you to either cause a job discrepancy or then basically clean up your database. So be aware of that when you are mounting those, of how they interact with each other. If you don't want to lose any data, to maybe export it before your job's done or every so often, just to have just in case. With these different options, we have several, like I said, the schema and everything else. Same way as before, you select the database and you're going through the same wizard as possible. You can select the state and time. When you do the state of this is back to the image level backup process, schema and date, then you can do a little bit more granular ability there. But at this time, that concludes our demo on these products. And I'm going to pass it back over to Billy. And if we want to take some questions, we can go from there. I thank you for spending your time with us today. And Billy?
Yeah, I'm talking away, and I was trying to tell you on mute that you are not off the hook yet. I've got a couple of good questions here for you, Travis.
Sure.
So this is from Mr. Adam Welch. If an Active Directory user is deleted and then restored, do they keep the same SID?
I'm actually not 100% sure off the top of my head. I need to look into that. I'm pretty sure it is the same, but I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to tell you the wrong answer. I do apologize.
Okay, let's move on to the next one here, and just in the sake of time, let me find it. Bear with me, this question window is a lot of fun. All right, here we go. With Exchange, can you restore items such as mail flow rules? This was from Matt Bartlett. I'm thinking, Matt, you're asking about rules. Do rules come back with the restore? Is that the question?
Rules for what type of restore? I apologize, I missed that.
I'm sorry, for a mail item.
The rules, I believe, do not get restored with the mail item. So you would, if you put it back to the middle mailbox, it would not get reapplied, but your rules should run again from there. You might just run your rules, but you also have the option to what folder you want to do the restore to. So because the mail item itself, I don't believe handles the rules in Exchange, and I apologize for my kind of lack of knowledge on actual Exchange administration, but I believe it's the database and everything on the thing in your mailbox which is running it. So if you have it set to do a timeout for rules, it would run it later on, or you could just run all your rules once you did the restore if it didn't go back to the original location. So, but if you do go back to your original folder, when you select the other one and didn't select the other one, it should go to the inbox or what folder it was in prior to that. So it would kind of apply the rule in there in certain situations.
And we've got a rescue line for you out in the audience, because if you guys, anyone that's a prospect to Veeam, Veemers are all in and they give us information too. So thanks, Barry Duchak, for saying the SID is going to be the same on the AD restore.
Thank you very much for that, Billy.
Yeah, no, that's Barry, not Billy.
Oh, Barry, thank you. Sorry. All
right.
Okay, so are the backup SQL transaction logs truncated by Veeam also visible in the SQL Studio? No, they are not. So then the one other thing to keep in mind when you are doing the SQL transaction backup or just having Veeam, by default, will do a SQL log truncation for the backup process. You only want to have one application handling log truncation, or one job, because sometimes when you have a backup job doing your SQL server, then you have an actual replication job. The replication job by default will set the Veeam to perform copy only. Or if you have a DBA that's very adamant going, I want to do my own backups, I want to do it natively, that's perfectly fine. You will just have Veeam set to do a perform copy only. So you still have the image level backup. So when that time comes where they have a problem or anything else, you can still give them the base image of the full entire VM or just the database back to them as well from based off of when the snapshot was taken. So I hope that answers your question there. Let me see what else, scrolling through.
There was a question about, did you answer the transaction logs in SQL Studio? Is that what you just went through?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. Let's see. What would happen if someone deleted a published database instead of just unpublishing it?
Basically what would happen is Veeam would probably give you the warning that it's no longer there. Wouldn't really harm anything per se. It would still stay in the Veeam console. So we had that kind of same thing with our instant VM recovery, is if you migrated the VM off the temporary data store to the production, it still shows in the Veeam. You just need to go back into Veeam and say unpublished and just to clean up your GUI. But it should have no negative impact overall, I should say, other than if you delete it and you were working in there, obviously, at that time. So.
All right, and we've got one more in here, Travis. I'm just going to go for broke here, right? Once in a while, I need to make a copy of my production database and restore it on my test SQL server. Would you recommend export database instead of restore database? How would you answer this from a Veeam perspective, Travis?
For exporter there, it kind of, I would say, depending on size and space available, the export, you're going to export it to a file there with it. I'd say the publish is probably your best bet, depending on how long you're going to be in there and what you need to do from it, then export it. But then you can also, I believe there's going to be a process to migrate as well. I have to look into double checking that, but other ways to get around the published aspect with it, but the main thing would be exporting it then and then doing your restore process, but also what you're comfortable doing in SQL. I know everybody's very different in that. I have limited access to SQL. I know the basics with it, and it really comes down to your personal preference. But restoring a very large database can take some time any way you look at it, but just doing the actual publishing can be much quicker for you to be up and running.
Yes, and Neftali said that was a 2 terabyte database. So
okay. Again, yeah. And the nice thing is about go back to the 2 terabyte thing is your target SQL server and stuff. Do you have the extra space of the 2 terabytes to allocate to put it there very easily? Where the publishing, you can publish it, and you're not going to add any extra space really to the database, to the SQL server. So right there, then that's why, like in our lab right now, if I tried to do that restore, the database wouldn't mount because we have it, very slimmed down for these demo type of operations, where the publish works just fine. So one good thing to keep in mind.
Let's see.
So for Exchange 2016 ESXi deployment, some say use CBT and some say not if backing up via VM replication. So CBT you do want enabled for Exchange. I would recommend doing that. In most cases, unless there's some very particular problem with it, but CBT is going to save you a lot of time on the backup job, because if we don't use ESXi's CBT data, we are going to default back to our Veeam's built-in mechanism, which will then have to enumerate all the files, then go back and do the blocks after the fact. So can definitely affect how your job performance. For log truncation as well, we do offer that for Exchange. It should be enabled by default, but just something to keep in mind there.
Yeah, that's part of VSS, the log truncation and Exchange. As soon as we send backup complete, VSS will run the operations to truncate the logs. So that's something that happens by default with that. Let's switch to another question here. I am liking this one. Can you publish an Oracle database like you can SQL?
I don't know off the top of my head on that one. That is something I definitely need to look into. I think maybe, but I do apologize my limited access into Oracle at this time.
Yeah. Sorry, Ted, we were the Microsoft crew here today
Yeah.
on this. So.
I do want to say about with Oracle, there is a lot of good documentation about ready to come out about that in the process and everything else. So keep an eye out for future content to really shine more for. And we had some recent blog posts about SAP HANA or just then Oracle and the Oracle plugin. But yeah, there's going to be a nice white paper coming out with a deep dive into it for the Oracle guys, because we have been behind and we're working on getting that updated for everyone. So.
Someone's asking about RMAN with Veeam. Again, more the Microsoft call today, but Veeam works with RMAN in the same way that others do. We invoke RMAN to perform the backup.
Yes, and then we have the new RMAN plugin, which then does it inline data stream to be able to process from it. In our user's guide, if you go to our VMware user's guide or Hyper-V, everything else, you will be able to see a section for the Oracle plugin that goes over a lot of these, some of these details. I very highly recommend doing your, utilizing the user's guide. I still use it on a daily basis. It is a wonderful tool, very in-depth and thing. It can be a little bit dry because it's directly technical, but it does have a lot of pictures and walkthroughs of process. One other last note I do want to just cover on basis for Explorers and everything else along these lines is we do have a severity 1 support team. So if you have a production down situation where you really need to get a file back or an email or something else, and you're not super comfortable going through this, our Severity 1 team is here to help you with that process. They will help you get that up and running. And then if they do run into some problems, they can't figure out how to do it directly through the standard restore, they'll help you do a workaround in the meantime to get that data back, because we understand how important that is. Once that's completed, then we can have our standard support do a root cause analysis if you like.
And I'm going to give you the last one of the day because we're going to have to wrap this up. This is coming from Brian. When you're publishing a SQL database, does the file stream data also get published?
I believe it's not there. The file stream does not, and I was looking at this earlier today. Let me bring that up and I can give you a quick answer on that from this. Let me go bring up my other side here. And I'm actually doing this because it talks about a file stream. I believe it's no on there. Data publishing, we talk about it because we link to a very specific Microsoft article on this. Time. So many things. Sorry about this. A bunch of stuff on my desktop here. It does require the SQL staging server. Oh, I'm very sorry for this one. Of course, when you need it right away, it's not there. I do know it is in our Explorers for SQL users guide where we discuss it and linking back to it. I'm just having the best time of finding that right now.
Are you trying to find the help center?
I'm on the help center, but it's under the data publishing, I want to say. Consider, oh, here we go, maybe that's icons, knowledge base. And oh, we're going to use this. Oh, here we go. So this one, okay. Important. So there is an important notion here it's under restoring database schema and data. File stream must be enabled on the staging SQL Server to restore the file tables. For more information on file stream, see the Microsoft article. I don't know if that directly answers what you were asking about more for the publishing. So the file stream, I'm not 100% sure on the actual publishing side. I do apologize.
And I apologize also, as that is all the time we have for today. We've got to respect everyone's time and wrap this up. Again, this has been recorded today. This will be published and will be made available, and you should be notified about that within a couple of days. So,
and one for Ed right there, I just noticed, is application item aware browser for Veeam Agent for Windows. Yes, you can. It's across agents, VBR, and everything else. Now, that will be a managed agents job that you're going to be doing that from, most likely, instead of a standalone per se, unless you're going to a Veeam backup and replication repository. If not, then you'll have to import the backup file into the Veeam server to usually do it. From a standalone instance, it's a little bit different. So.
All right, I know we had a couple more questions in there. I am sorry we couldn't answer all of them. We got through about 95% of them. Again, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you again for making Veeam your choice. You guys have a great day. Thanks, Travis.